Bullies pulled the new girl's hair. She snapped his arm in one twist. Delaney Reese pressed her back against the cold metal of her locker, hoping to blend into the background noise of Riverside High School's bustling hallway. 3 weeks into the semester, and she still felt like a ghost haunting corridors filled with students who had known each other since kindergarten. Her petite frame, barely 5 feet tall, made her easy to overlook, something she'd grown accustomed to after moving from town to town with her military father. This time, they'd landed in Cedar Falls, Iowa, where cornfields stretched endlessly beyond the school's brick walls. Her auburn hair hung in loose waves past her shoulders, often covering half her face like a curtain she could hide behind. Wire-rimmed glasses perched on her nose, and her clothes, simple jeans and oversized sweaters, spoke of someone trying desperately not to draw attention. What none of her classmates knew was that beneath those baggy sleeves lay muscles honed by years of rigorous training. Her father, a Marine Corps instructor, had insisted she learn to defend herself from the time she could walk. Krav Maga, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and Muay Thai had become second nature to her, but she'd learned long ago that revealing such skills only led to more problems. "Watch where you're going, freak," Colton Bradley's voice cut through her thoughts as his shoulder deliberately clipped hers, sending her books tumbling to the floor. The quarterback towered over her at 6'2", his blonde hair perfectly styled and his Letterman jacket pristine. Behind him stood his faithful shadows, Jackson Mills, stocky and mean-spirited, and Braden Cross, whose cruel smirk never seemed to leave his face. Delaney knelt to gather her scattered papers, her cheeks burning with familiar shame. "Sorry," she mumbled, though she'd done nothing wrong. "Yeah, you should be," Jackson sneered, deliberately stepping on her chemistry notes. "Maybe next time you'll pay attention instead of daydreaming about whatever weirdos like you think about." The hallway continued its flow around them, students either too busy or too cowardly to intervene. This had become routine over the past week, small humiliations designed to remind her of her place in the school's social hierarchy. Delaney had faced bullies before in other schools, but something about Colton's crew felt different. They weren't just mean. They were calculating, choosing their moments when teachers weren't around and witnesses were either complicit or indifferent. "Leave her alone." The voice came from behind the trio, calm but firm. Delaney looked up to see Asher Montenegro approaching, his dark hair slightly tousled and his brown eyes focused intently on Colton. He wasn't particularly tall or muscular, but something about his presence made the bullies pause. "Oh, look, the freak's got a boyfriend," Braden laughed, though he took a small step back. "What are you going to do about it, Montenegro?" "Write us a strongly worded poem." Asher helped Delaney to her feet, his touch gentle but confident. "I'm going to suggest you find something better to do with your time," he replied evenly. "Picking on someone half your size isn't exactly impressive." Colton's jaw tightened, but the warning bell chose that moment to ring, saving face for all involved. "This isn't over," he muttered, shooting both Delaney and Asher a look that promised future trouble. As the bullies disappeared into the crowd, Asher turned to Delaney with a concerned expression. "You okay?" "Those guys are absolute trash." "I'm fine," she said quietly, though her hands were shaking slightly. "Thanks for stepping in, but you didn't have to. I don't want you getting in trouble because of me." "Everyone deserves to feel safe at school," Asher replied, adjusting his backpack strap. "I'm Asher, by the way. I sit behind you in Mrs. Chen's English class." "Delaney." She managed a small smile, the first genuine one she'd felt in weeks. "And I know who you are. You write for the school newspaper, right?" They walked together toward their next class, and for a brief moment, Delaney allowed herself to hope that maybe this school could be different. Asher made her laugh with his dry observations about their teachers, and she found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't experienced since arriving in Cedar Falls. That hope proved short-lived. The next day brought a new level of torment. During lunch, as Delaney sat alone in the cafeteria reading, Jackson accidentally knocked over his chocolate milk, sending the sticky liquid cascading across her table and soaking her sandwich. The entire cafeteria erupted in laughter as she tried to salvage her lunch with paper napkins. "Oops," Jackson said with mock concern. "Guess you'll have to go hungry, Butterfingers." Delaney's training screamed at her to react, to show them what she was capable of, but her father's voice echoed in her mind. "Your skills are for protection, not for proving points. Walk away unless you have no choice." So she gathered her ruined belongings and left, ignoring the snickers that followed her exit. The harassment escalated throughout the week. They'd wait by her locker between classes, making comments about her appearance and her clothes. During gym class, Braden would accidentally spike volleyballs directly at her head. In the hallways, they'd spread rumors about her being weird, antisocial, and stuck up. The psychological warfare was methodical and relentless. Asher tried to help when he could, but the bullies were careful to avoid him or strike when he wasn't around. His presence had become a bright spot in Delaney's increasingly dark days. They'd started eating lunch together when possible, and she found herself looking forward to their conversations about books, movies, and their shared love of photography. He had a way of making her feel normal, like she belonged somewhere. The breaking point came on a Friday afternoon in late September. Delaney was walking toward the parking lot, where the school buses lined up like yellow dominoes, when she heard familiar voices near the gymnasium entrance. Her stomach dropped as she recognized Asher's voice, strained and defensive. "I told you to back off," Asher was saying, his usual calm cracking slightly. "Or what?" Colton's laugh was harsh and mocking. "You'll write about us in your little newspaper? Face it, Montenegro, you're nothing but a wannabe journalist who thinks he's better than everyone else." Delaney peered around the corner to see Asher backed against the brick wall, Colton looming over him while Jackson and Braden flanked him on either side. Her heart began racing, but not from fear, from anger. "You know what your problem is?" Colton continued, jabbing his finger into Asher's chest. "You think you can play hero for that weird girl, like you're in some kind of movie. But this is real life, and real life has consequences." "She's not weird," Asher replied firmly, though Delaney could see his hands were clenched into fists. "She's just trying to get through school like everyone else. Maybe if you actually tried talking to people instead of terrorizing them, you'd realize that." The slap echoed off the gymnasium walls as Colton's palm connected with Asher's cheek. "Don't lecture me, you pretentious little punk. Maybe it's time someone taught you about respect." That's when Delaney stepped around the corner. "Leave him alone," she said, her voice carrying further than she'd intended. All four boys turned to look at her, and she saw the predatory gleam in Colton's eyes. "Well, well, well. Look who decided to join the party. Come to rescue your boyfriend, freak." "He's not my boyfriend," Delaney said quietly, though she felt heat rising in her cheeks. "Just leave him alone. Your problem is with me, not him." Colton released Asher and turned his full attention to her, a cruel smile spreading across his face. "You're right about that. You know what? I think it's time we had a proper conversation about your attitude problem." He began walking toward her with slow, deliberate steps, like a predator stalking wounded prey. Jackson and Braden spread out to flank her, cutting off potential escape routes. Delaney's training kicked in automatically. She assessed distances, angles, potential weapons, and exit strategies. But still, her father's voice held her back. These were just kids being cruel, not real threats. She could endure this. "You think you're so special, don't you?" Colton continued, now close enough that she could smell his cologne mixed with the faint scent of cigarettes. "Walking around here like you're better than everyone, like you're too good to even talk to people. Well, maybe it's time someone knocked you down a few pegs." "Please," Asher called out, starting to move toward them. "Just leave her alone. This is stupid." "Stay back," Braden warned. shoving Asher hard enough to send him stumbling. "This doesn't concern you anymore." Colton reached out and grabbed a handful of Delaney's long auburn hair, his grip tight enough to make her scalp burn. "You know what I think," he said, twisting his hand to force her to look up at him. "I think you need to learn some manners, maybe some respect for the people who actually matter at this school." The pain shot through her scalp like electricity, but it wasn't the physical discomfort that finally broke something inside Delaney. It was the sound of Asher's sharp intake of breath, the mixture of pain and helplessness in his voice as he said her name. It was the realization that these bullies would never stop, that they would keep escalating until someone got seriously hurt. "Let go of me," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the fury building in her chest. Colton yanked harder, forcing her head back at an uncomfortable angle. "Or what? What are you going to do about it, little girl?" That's when Delaney made her choice. Her training took over with fluid precision. She reached up with both hands, grasping Colton's wrist with one while using the other to support his elbow. In one swift motion, she pivoted her body and applied pressure, a textbook arm manipulation that her Krav Maga instructor had drilled into her hundreds of times. The crack was audible across the parking lot. Colton's scream shattered the afternoon air as he released her hair and dropped to his knees, cradling his arm against his chest. "You broke it!" he gasped, his face pale with shock and pain. "You actually broke my arm." The silence that followed was deafening. Jackson and Braden stood frozen, their mouths hanging open as they stared at their leader writhing on the concrete. Students who had been walking to their buses stopped and turned, creating a growing circle of witnesses. Delaney stepped back, her breathing controlled, despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "I told you to let go," she said simply. "You psycho!" Jackson finally found his voice, but he made no move toward her. "You can't just attack people like that." "Attack?" Delaney's laugh was cold and humorless. "He grabbed me first. I defended myself. There's a difference." Braden was already pulling out his phone, probably to call for help, but his hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold it steady. The mighty trio that had terrorized her for weeks had been reduced to a whimpering quarterback and two terrified followers in the span of 5 seconds. Asher appeared at her side, his eyes wide with amazement and concern. "Delaney, are you okay? How did you—" "I'm fine," she said, though her heart was still racing. She looked down at Colton, who was making wounded animal sounds as he rocked back and forth. "It's just a simple break. He'll live." "Just a simple break?" Colton managed to gasp out between waves of pain. "You're insane." "No," Delaney replied, kneeling down so she was at his eye level. "I'm tired. Tired of walking on eggshells, tired of being your entertainment, tired of watching you hurt people who've done nothing to deserve it." She gestured toward Asher. "He tried to help me, so you decided to hurt him too. That was your mistake." The crowd around them was growing larger, with several students recording the scene on their phones. Delaney could hear the excited whispers spreading through the group like wildfire. The quiet new girl had just taken down the school's star quarterback with her bare hands. "I could have done worse," she continued, her voice calm and measured. "Much worse, but I'm not like you. I don't hurt people just because I can." Principal Harrison's voice cut through the crowd as he pushed his way to the center of the circle. "What's going on here? Someone called about a fight. She attacked me." Colton immediately pointed at Delaney with his good arm. "She just went crazy and broke my arm for no reason." "That's not what happened," Asher said firmly, stepping forward. Colton grabbed her hair and was threatening her. She was defending herself. "He's lying," Braden protested, but his voice lacked conviction. "Colton was just talking to her, and she snapped." Principal Harrison looked around the crowd, taking in the scene. "I need witnesses. What did everyone see?" To Delaney's surprise, several students spoke up. A senior girl named Madison stepped forward first. "Colton and his friends cornered her and the other guy by the gym. I saw him grab her hair and pull it really hard." "Yeah," added a sophomore boy whose name Delaney didn't know. They've been messing with her for weeks. Today they finally went too far. More voices joined in, painting a clear picture of what had really happened. Delaney realized that more people had been watching than she'd thought. They'd just been too afraid or apathetic to intervene before. Now, with the dynamics suddenly shifted, they felt safe enough to speak the truth. The paramedics arrived within minutes, carefully immobilizing Colton's arm before loading him onto a stretcher. As they wheeled him away, he shot Delaney a look that mixed pain with grudging respect. "This isn't over," he muttered, though the words lacked his usual venom. "Yeah, it is," Delaney replied quietly, "for all of us." Principal Harrison gathered statements from the key witnesses before addressing Delaney directly. "Miss Reese, while I understand you were defending yourself, we're going to need to discuss this situation in detail. This kind of violence, even in self-defense, has serious consequences." "I understand," Delaney nodded, "but I want to be clear about something. I didn't want to hurt anyone. I just wanted them to stop." The principal studied her for a long moment, then glanced at Asher and the other witnesses. "We'll sort this out properly. For now, I think everyone should head home and let today's events settle." As the crowd began to disperse, Asher walked with Delaney toward the bus line. "So," he said after a few moments of silence, "martial arts?" "Something like that," she replied, still feeling the effects of the adrenaline. "My dad's military. He made sure I could take care of myself." "Remind me never to get on your bad side," Asher said with a small smile. "Though I have to ask, why didn't you do something sooner? You could have ended this weeks ago." Delaney was quiet for a moment, watching the buses load up with students who were undoubtedly gossiping about what they'd just witnessed. Because once you show people what you're capable of, everything changes. They either fear you or they challenge you, and neither option leads to a normal life. "And you want a normal life?" "I wanted to try," she admitted. "But I guess that's not really an option anymore." Asher stopped walking and turned to face her. "For what it's worth, I think what you did was brave. Not the fighting part, though that was pretty impressive, but the part where you stood up for yourself. And for me." Their eyes met, and Delaney felt something flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with adrenaline. "You stood up for me first," she reminded him, "even when you knew it might get you hurt." "Yeah, well," Asher shrugged, his cheeks reddening slightly. "That's what decent people do for each other." The following Monday brought a completely different atmosphere to Riverside High. Word of the confrontation had spread over the weekend, evolving into legend with each retelling. By the time Delaney arrived at school, she discovered that her quiet anonymity had been permanently shattered. Students she'd never spoken to nodded respectfully as she passed in the hallways. The usual crowd that gathered around Colton's locker was notably absent. He was still at home recovering from his broken arm. Jackson and Braden kept their distance, shooting her wary glances but making no attempt to approach. During lunch, Delaney was surprised to find herself surrounded by classmates who wanted to hear her side of the story. She deflected most of their questions, uncomfortable with the attention, but she noticed something important. The fear that had permeated the cafeteria for weeks was gone. Other students who had been targets of various bullies were sitting up straighter, speaking more confidently. "You started something," Asher observed as they walked to their next class together. "People are talking about standing up for themselves instead of just enduring it." "That wasn't my intention," Delaney replied, though she couldn't deny the satisfaction she felt seeing other students empowered. "I just wanted them to leave us alone." The real test came Thursday afternoon when Colton returned to school, his arm in a bright blue cast that seemed to announce his defeat to the entire student body. Delaney was at her locker when she sensed someone approaching. She turned to find him standing a careful distance away, his usual confident swagger replaced by something more cautious. "Can we talk?" he asked quietly, glancing around to make sure they weren't being overheard. Delaney studied his face for signs of deception or anger, but found only exhaustion and something that might have been regret. Okay. They walked in silence to an empty classroom, where Colton closed the door behind them before turning to face her. "I owe you an apology," he said without preamble. "What I did was wrong. What we did was wrong." "Why?" Delaney asked simply. "Why did you target me?" Colton slumped into a desk chair, suddenly looking much younger than his imposing presence usually suggested. "Because it was easy," he admitted. "You were new, you were quiet, you didn't fight back. And honestly, because I was angry about other stuff and taking it out on someone who couldn't hurt me back seemed safer than dealing with my real problems." "What real problems?" He was quiet for a long moment, staring at his cast. "My parents are getting divorced. Have been fighting about it for months. My dad expects me to get a football scholarship because he never could, but my grades are garbage and scouts are already losing interest. Everything in my life feels out of control, so I guess I tried to control something else." Delaney felt an unexpected pang of sympathy. "That doesn't excuse what you did." "No, it doesn't," Colton agreed. "I know that now. You could have hurt me a lot worse than you did, couldn't you?" "Yes. Why didn't you?" Delaney considered the question carefully. "Because hurting people doesn't solve anything. It just creates more hurt. What you needed wasn't more pain. You needed to understand that your actions have consequences." Colton nodded slowly. "I get it now. And I'm sorry. Not just for grabbing you, but for all of it. The hallway stuff, the cafeteria, making your life miserable just because I could." He paused, then added, "I told Jackson and Braden to back off too. They won't bother you anymore." "What about other people?" Delaney asked. "Are you going to find new targets now that I'm off limits?" "No," Colton said firmly. "I'm done with all that. I'm going to try to figure out how to deal with my actual problems instead of creating new ones for other people." As they prepared to leave the classroom, Colton stopped at the door. "For what it's worth, you're tougher than anyone I know. Not because you can break arms, but because you stayed yourself even when we were trying to break you down." The rest of the semester passed peacefully. Delaney found herself settling into a rhythm at Riverside High that she'd never experienced before. She had friends, she felt safe, and she was no longer constantly looking over her shoulder. Her relationship with Asher deepened as they spent more time together, studying in the library and sharing quiet conversations about their dreams and fears. She even began to appreciate the respect her classmates showed her, though she was careful never to use her skills for anything other than protection. When a group of older students tried to intimidate a younger boy for his lunch money, a simple look from Delaney was enough to send them walking away. Word had spread about what happened to the last person who underestimated the quiet girl with the auburn hair. On the last day before winter break, Delaney was cleaning out her locker when she found a note that had been slipped through the vents. Inside was a simple message. "Thank you for showing us that we don't have to be victims. The students you inspired." She smiled, folding the note carefully and tucking it into her backpack. Walking toward the exit where Asher was waiting for her, Delaney reflected on how much had changed since that day in September. She'd learned that sometimes standing up for yourself means more than just protecting your own dignity. It means showing others that they have the power to protect theirs too. The girl who had tried so hard to blend into the background had discovered that some battles are worth fighting, not for revenge or dominance, but for the simple right to exist without fear. And sometimes the quiet ones are the ones with the most strength to give.